Thank you all for being here today. It's of course a strange thing to be doing our seminar, online in this manner, but this is what we have. So thank you for being here. To speak of here is a little strange because here is simply a virtual space where our physically distant selves have come together. We have in these very troubled COVID times somehow braced ourselves for a more or less prolonged struggle of normalcy. So, the thing which we really have to think about, a very crucial part of this normalcy is to keep our precious educational institutions running. And this webinar is an attempt to let this institution, Shyam College, emerge in this virtual space today, bringing together not just our own staff and students, but also many from all over the country. And we are delighted to have you all here. So what is digital humanities all about? So many of us are on social media today, our phones more or less prosthetically attached to our bodies. And yet the word digital joined to humanity seems to be something like an oxymoron. But it's not really because we are afraid of anything digital. We are living in the information age, and most of this information comes to us at us really through digital media. For example, anytime we Google something, we are going digital. So the skepticism is perhaps more about the idea of the sanctity of the humanities really. The humanities for many of us is that pure residue of our pre-digital and therefore pre-information overload past, which we'd like to keep untainted. To us, this term also evokes an imaginary battle between the humanities and the sciences, something which C.P. Snow called the two cultures back in 1959. But the digital humanities, or DH as it is abbreviated, it's not simply a resolution of that battle, it is a lot more, which our esteemed guest, Dr. Arjun Ghosh, will speak about today. DH does a lot of cool stuff too, giving us newer ways of engaging with the traditional domain of the humanities, like the tiny strip of bubbles on our poster, which gives us a bird's eye view of a novel most of us have read, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This strip was created in 5 minutes, thanks to the labor of all the DH enthusiasts who have made numerous tools available to us for free to do all this. But the digital humanities is, of course, a lot more than just cool tricks, and I believe we'll learn a lot more about it from our speaker, Dr. Ghosh. This webinar has been organized by the Department of English in collaboration with the IQAC. Let me invite the convener of the IQAC, Dr. Kusha Tiwari, to say a few words. Kusha, over to you.
Mute me.
Right. You are, I can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sumita, for this brief introduction about the idea that this seminar is or webinar is based on. I welcome our esteemed speaker, though I'm not able to see him here. Yes, this topic entirely sounds very, very interesting and new. The webinar is being organized by Department of English and IQAC, and Shimla College has actually been organizing a lot of seminars on the virtual mode. Even before the lockdown, we used to have a regular feature in our college called annual virtual lecture, which we used to organize with resource persons from other countries. And with this lockdown, we have actually just we are doing it all the more. So we've had 7 days workshop, we've had various other lectures and webinars from different departments and centers that have been organized, and this particular webinar is one in that series. The topic, as I said, sounds very, very interesting, and I somehow think that there is, no such conflict or war that exists these days between humanities and technology, because all of us actually are using a lot of tools to offer new perspectives on humanities. And as teachers, what we teach our students, we are not just using the traditional chalk duster method. We are also incorporating a lot of tools. It's not just digitized text that we use these days. There are other tools, images, visuals that we use in everyday life when we are interacting with our students. but definitely the title does sound fancy. And when I looked up on internet, I saw that Harvard University was actually offering a 7-week online course, which I immediately joined. So I actually joined the course on digital humanities today itself, and I'll be starting with it today. So that would be my, that would be my involvement with this entire new area, supposedly new area. So I'm happy that I've done that, and I'm happy that I'll be learning a lot of new things through this webinar. All these things, what we are doing in our college, all these lectures and webinars that we are organizing, we've been organizing under the headship of our principal, Professor Abhi Narayankar, who, he never stops pushing us to do new things. In fact, yesterday itself, we had an online yoga competition, which was one of its own kind event in Delhi University. It actually went on for 5-6 hours, and we had participants from different parts of India, and it was a wonderful experience for everyone, for teachers, for non-performers, also for participants, people who were performing. And I must say that there was a very enlightened lecture that was given by Swami Chaitanya ji from Rishikesh. He had joined us from Rishikesh. It was a wonderful time that we had yesterday, and I'm sure we are going to have a wonderful time with this seminar on a different topic, of course. I request our principal, Sir Professor Abhi Narayankar, to give the welcome address. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. Am I audible? Okay. So first of all, thanks for your kind words, Madam Dr. Kusha. So at the outset also, I'd like to congratulate the Department of English of SLC under the this mentorship of Dr. Smita Sharma. So I'd like to congratulate all of you for having chosen this wonderful topic for deliberations. And at the outset also, I could see Professor Arjun Ghosh sitting, so I extend a very, very warm welcome to you, sir. And the way I was trying to follow what Dr. Sumita was telling, Dr. Kusha was telling about this topic, to my mind, that definitely not only it, it's something, sounds very, very fresh. To me, as a researcher also, it gives a lot of inputs and insights into this. Having said that, being from a social science stream, we used to visualize a lot, but we have never ever implemented, even in our research studies also, beyond this quantitative methods and even qualitative methods are also very, very limited. Though we have been often this, as a mention of visualization is very, very important tool in research, but I don't think that besides geography, any other field of even humanities, we ever use visualization in great extent in our research area. So in that question, when we talk about this visualization, I really am confused whether we need to take a multidisciplinary approach, an interdisciplinary approach. So here I think the interdisciplinary approach, I'll be more keen to learn what Dr. Ghosh is going to do it. But to me, I think that definitely it is an interdisciplinary approach where, a lot of, you talk about this, how you are bringing this digital technology and other things, and how things are being visualized even in advance, that you bring to your classrooms in your even fields like your literature and humanities. So I won't take much time, but yes, we do agree and we do believe in this digitalization. Since in 2015, we have been experimenting with digitalization when we started engaging in virtual lectures and bringing professors from abroad into the classrooms. So now it has become a very real issue, which was not before in 5 years back, but we have been doing that. So maybe we'll be very, very keen to learn from Professor Ghosh and his ideas regarding this digital humanities. So I wish you all the best. And at the same time, also once again, you deserve all the congratulations. And both the Department of English and IQAC, and I hope all the participants will be not only learning from this experience, they will be bringing it to the classrooms and into their research. And finally, the last part of the list, I will extend a very, very warm welcome to all the participants. I see around 100 participants are there in this period. So I extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you. And we very keen to see the deliberations here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your welcome address. And now we'll move on to our speaker. Dr. Arjun Ghosh is Associate Professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Delhi. He has also been a Fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla. Dr. Ghosh is author of A History of the Jananatya Manch, Play for the People, which I believe is based on his PhD thesis from JNU, and Freedom from Profit, Eschewing Copyright in Resistance Art. He is also currently an adjunct professor to the Interdisciplinary Research Platform in the Digital Humanities at IIT Jodhpur. I would also, before welcoming him, I would also like to introduce Abbasuddin Tapadar, a member of our Department of English, who will be passing on participants' questions to Dr. Ghosh. Abbas, could you just, say something?
Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome on board webinar.
Right, and we also have Anuj Kushwaha helping us with this entire exercise through chat, because like we requested in our guidelines, we would like everyone to send their questions to Anuj, who is one of the co-hosts. So please type in your questions along with your name and institutional affiliation, so he can read those out as well. Please also remember that since we have time constraints, we may not be able to take up all the questions. So don't mind if your question doesn't get passed on. I'm sure Dr. Ghosh would be very willing to discuss this with you sometime later. You can also, of course, get to know him through his very, very cool website, which I encourage you to look at. So Anuj, could you just also show your face to everyone so they know whom they're talking to you?
Hello everyone, I'm Anuj.
Okay, so now let's begin. Let's invite Dr. Arjun Ghosh to begin with his talk. Over to you, Arjun.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. This is indeed a unique experience for me. I hope everything goes off fine. But first of all, I'll begin by thanking the SLC for inviting me for this webinar, the principal, all the members of the faculty, particularly Sumita. And I must say, looking at the list of participants, I can see a lot of familiar faces, and it's good to see you in these troubled times. Hopefully you will spend a few minutes very usefully in this particular webinar. So I'll begin straight away. I hope this technology really works. Right. So I hope you can share, you can see my screen. So, when we talk about the digital humanities, and we're looking at it in times when there is this policy of social distancing. Just give me a second. I can't see my screen. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, there you are. So social distancing is the norm today, which is enforced by certain conditions, an emergency condition. But we have to just go back a few hundred years to figure out that human society, and we in the social distancing, we try to keep in touch with each other using digital methods. But of course, this is very new. But there was a point of time in human society largely rural, and social distancing is something that would be there, as a norm. it was also physical distancing. People would meet only on certain occasions and during village fairs, the Sunday, the Sunday bazaars or the Wednesday bazaars and stuff like that. People would walk along those roads and go and meet others from time to time. But otherwise, they would basically work in their farms and stay in their homes, and that's how things would be. Now, what would have been literary life at this time? And you would also have, certain spaces, the towns and castles and the churchyards, which are places where people would gather together. And these cities, these towns would be spaced far out within the kingdom, within the continent. And this is where there would have been a slightly more, a greater density of population, though not as dense as some of our cities in India or elsewhere. And what would have been the kind of literary life? Most of the times, it was print hadn't yet been invented, so it was manuscript culture. People would write down their ideas, thoughts about various things. What you can see here is an Arabic text describing a certain kind of machine, probably, and this is through which our exchange of ideas would be possible. This is manuscript culture, which was preceded by oral cultures before that. But manuscript culture, the one interesting thing about it is that knowledge can move outside the body and can travel without the knower. The knower can write down whatever they have to, and the knowledge can travel without the body of the knower requiring to travel. That was itself a certain kind of a revolutionary change in the history of ideas. But manuscripts would be few and far between. There will be very few copies of a particular text. And even when there are copies, there are interpolations and other things which would make the mean that each manuscript copy would differ significantly from another one. And people would have to sit down and copy these manuscripts. And most of the times, these scholars who would be studying, they would be monks who would be studying in their monasteries, and they would be studying on their own, or they will be. Another thing that would happen is that these monks in the monasteries, they can discuss with each other, but they cannot discuss things with the larger scholarly community. So you had more gharanas kind of knowledge, where a small group, silos of scholars would be discussing things with each other. Now, all that changes very significantly with the coming of printing, where number of books, availability of books increases exponentially. And what it leads to is that at any point of time, the number of books in the libraries, in people's personal collections, particularly of princesses and universities, start coming up. The exchange of knowledge becomes a great deal. And this leads to scientific inquiry, where a certain truth, a certain idea, its acceptability gets tested against phenomena from across geographies, across various places. Now, this leads to a certain kind of scientific temper, where collaboration becomes a certain kind of a norm. However, that did not change significantly the mechanism of humanistic inquiry. Humanistic inquiry, if you look at the progress of science, if you look at large scientific projects, for example, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN, you find workspaces like this, which are intensely collaborative. Or you have the Chandrayaan mission control room, where scientists are sitting together, and you can see them like actually discussing something and collaborating. More scientific papers, if you look at journals in the humanities and the journals in scientific communities, you'll find that science, there are a lot more collaborative journals, right? Collaborative articles. Whereas humanities, primarily we write single authored books and or single authored articles. So if you look at the top libraries in the humanities, though there's sitting space for everybody together, everybody is sort of in a cubicle. There's a certain kind of a separator there, sort of reimagining the medieval cloister of priests and monks. Now, what I'm trying to say is that with the coming of the print, a certain kind of change in the way of exchange of knowledge and certain kind of way in which knowledge production takes place. And digital is the next jump. This change in technology leads to a certain kind of a move, it has a potential of shifting this possibility in two very significant ways. One is that you have the possibility with digital tools of looking at much larger sets of knowledge or texts. I mean, in my lifetime, how many books would I be able to read? Let's say 1,000 books, 2,000 books. I don't know how well read can a person be. But if we look at something like Google Books, now you can send a certain query, and this is where the tricky bit comes in. I have to share another screen. Just give me a second. Yeah, so I don't know if any of you have checked out the Google Ngram viewer. You see here what they've done is there is a search. I put two search terms there on democracy and dictatorship. And Google has just run through millions of books in its content and given us a map of the presence of the word democracy in these books across time, right? Now, what does this allow us to do? And if you look at the two peaks right there, can you? I think you can figure out what these peaks really are. Where are they peaking? They are peaking around the world wars, and they're peaking, moving to a plateau at around the year 2000 and sort of falling off. So now we can see that there is a serious concern around democracy around the world wars. But this allows us to enter into a certain kind of scholarship which reading of 1,000 books will not do. Or normally when someone, a scholar, writes a book, maybe 200 articles and 100 books they would have read if it's very well researched. But here you have a possibility of running tools through very large data sets. This is something that is coming to the humanities and possibly can revolutionize humanities scholarship. The second point of the revolutionizing, of course, is the question of collaborative work. I think with the digital humanities, collaborative work becomes important because with such large data sets, we need multiple expertise. Not only humanities expertise, so expertise in philosophy, literature, history, sociology, but also expertise in various tools and techniques and algorithms, right? So it's not possible any longer for a single person to have comprehensive, encompassing knowledge that the humanities have always had. All right. Let me try to go back to the slide now. There are three buttons that I have to press to move from one slide to another. Right. Okay. Okay, so digital humanities, when I want to talk about digital humanities, it is actually a big tent. It contains many things. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things. I don't think it's possible in 40 minutes to do justice to everything under this tent. So the first thing that I want to talk about, first kind of definition of characteristic of the digital humanities is archiving and digitization. So as you understand that in the humanities, archives play a very important role. And because it is through archives that knowledge can be culled, right? So now to move, most of these archives exist in material forms, either as manuscripts or as printed texts, and they do have a certain shelf life. And certainly the kind of tools that we are looking at, the kind of Google Ngrams and all, it's only possible because Google has already digitized much of the stuff. So both the things benefit. It makes it dynamically searchable and researchable is through the digitization process. So what are some of the leading examples of digitization? In India, I would say that the School of Cultural Texts and Records in Jodhpur University have pioneered this field for the last couple of decades, and they have worked on many on collecting manuscripts and digitizing them and also collecting music and digitizing them in a very large scale. For a humanities department, we know the kind of funds that we get for to be able to do this thing is purely not the product of money; it's the product of passion and a very great commitment to academics and pedagogy. One of the flagship projects of the SCTR at Jodhpur is Vichitra, where they actually create an online varorium of the texts of Rabindranath Tagore, and the tool actually allows you to run various kinds of analysis on these texts. It's not merely just a repository, but also allows us to run certain tests through them. And what's interesting also is that they have digitized Tagore's manuscripts, and OCR, or optical character reader for manuscripts, Bengali manuscripts, is not very well developed. So it required a lot of work from many people to put this collection together. And a very large scale project, of course, is the British Library Endangered Archives program, which archives and puts online, makes it available for researchers worldwide, the enormous sort of resources that the British Library holds. And it's possible today to be able to conduct a research without actually visiting the library buildings in London, in central London. Many of you may be aware of the 1947 archive, partition archive, which seeks to, I believe it is now moved to Stanford, which seeks to conduct interviews across various partition survivors, or interview people with memories of partition, and sort of make it available to researchers. And is able to, and these interviews are transcribed, and a certain kind of story of partition is possible to be told, which official histories or even hitherto written histories have not been able to do. A similar kind of a project, if I want to talk about, I find a very interesting project, the slave revolt of in Jamaica in 1760. Now, what happens typically is that the story of a slave, an event like a slave revolt, gets told only through the eyes of or the words of those who are the victors, that is the colonizers. But how do you know about the experience of actually the people who revolted, the slaves, because they never wrote down anything. So you have this researcher who actually collates little bits of data, little bits of references from various records, and try to figure out what the strategy of the slaves were. We know how the colonial army moved, but we do not know how the slave army moved. And he is trying to put that through on a map. And this is using geographical information systems, or GIS techniques, to do this. All right, let's return to our original slides. All right, so and you can actually try some of these tools Sorry, did you guys get to see the? I doubt if you got to actually see the slave movement. Did you see this? All right, you can see, you can play it around later on when you have time. You can see that they are able to trace the movement of the slave arm, right? All right. And now throughout this talk, I'm going to try to show certain tools which you can play around with. So one of the tools is ArcGIS story maps. What the ArcGIS story maps allow you to do is uh, to actually create similar kind of story maps on by yourself. In fact, this could be a very interesting sort of project for students who read something and they can be asked to give a submission in the form of these story maps. What the story maps do is visualize the either through photographs or through maps certain sections of the text. So wherever the action is, it tries to sort of project that. Sorry, this is taking some time to load. So probably we'll look at it later. My internet is probably not very strong here. But what you would have likely seen is certain the movement in the maps as the story moves along. That could be very interesting for students to play around. Right. Right. So I think you can see that now. So if I scroll down the story, you can see the map moving. There you are. Anyway, we can play around with it. You can go to the ArcGIS website and figure out many more examples of this. All right, next segment. That is next thing under the big tent. That is electronic literatures. Electronic literature, basically it's hypertext. So instead of having a linear text, now you can understand that a lot of writers have experimented with breaking the linearity of the text, because the way the codex is typically designed is that it's stitched. So you have to, no matter how stream of consciousness you go, how metafiction you go, whatever technique you use, it's the reader still reads from the page 1 to page 100 of the last page, right? That's how the book is constructed. That is how it is supposed to be read. So there is a tyranny of in oral narratives, that tyranny is not there. Of course, people can jump from one narrative element to another. With the digital, one returns to that possibility. So there are a lot of hypertext fiction, and one of the most famous ones is Patchwork Girl by Shelley Jackson. Some of the things that you may have followed, I mean, video games online, and video games are also another very interesting, where people choose their characters, where it's really kind of trying to empower the reader and empowering the user to choose whatever the strain of the narrative is, instead of the author dictating whatever the narrative is. The print form is something that privileges the author in a sort of way. Of course, there is the death of the author and the birth of the reader, where the importance of the reader cannot be undermined. But in terms of the technology of communication, here is the entry of the reader or the user, where the user chooses certain roles and goes through different layers, and the narrative is a resultant of the kind of narrative choices made by the user at various points of time. So you have the various kinds of games are there, but you have the first person shooter kind of games, and one would remind you of the kind of a real life projection of it with a New Zealand mosque shooter who actually live streamed him. And if you see, the point of view is almost exact. And there are, of course, other applications of games. For example, the Game Changer lab at University of Chicago, what they do is they create certain kinds of games which sort of uh, the target in the game in the user is the player is the owner or the proprietor of a tobacco company, and the target is to get more and more people addicted to tobacco so that the sales grow. But the point in the game, somewhere down the line, people who are the biggest consumers of tobacco start dying, and the becomes of education, of pedagogy kind of tool. Something very similar that these kind of choices which are made. Some of you may have I wanted to use the word play, but you might have watched this Netflix edition of Black Mirror called Bandersnatch, where you were supposed to accept or refuse certain choices or make certain narrative choices at various points of time. And behind you can see how this entire narrative scheme is mapped out. And you see, it's not a linear narrative, it's more like a branch kind of narrative. All right. This is something you can try. This is Survive COVID kind of game, which tells the story from the point of view of these migrant laborers who are faced with devil's choices themselves in order to survive, whether you can survive through. So this becomes a very important tool to teach students, to tell students how to, or all of us, how the experience of a migrant labor. So this is something you can try out. Okay, let's move to the next big tent. Is digital pedagogy, use of digital tools in the mechanisms of learning. Of course, all this is also this webinar is an example of digital pedagogy, but just putting somebody in front of a camera and asking that person to teach is not digital pedagogy or online teaching, no matter which agency wants us to believe that. Digital pedagogy, someone mentioned the introduction to digital humanities course offered by the EDX. And if you look at that course, for example, it's a very different experience from the kind of courses that we see on our various kind of online portals which are there. It's much more interactive, and there is a great degree of engagement with the reader. Right now, I am speaking, and the participants, I don't even see the participants here, but and the participants cannot even intervene other than send some questions down. But online pedagogy has a far greater possibility and needs a lot of infrastructure in. Just a mobile phone or laptop camera is not online teaching. Again, a lot of research. I request you to check this one out. It's Indian Community QuickBooks, a site created on Wix, in which certain undergraduate students from Flame University have created this website. We've looked at and tried to map various cookbooks of the past, of various kinds of cuisines in India. And what they have tried to do is that they have tried to map these cookbooks on a timeline. And as you move along the timeline, you can see the different kind of texts and the various kinds of recipes and visual representations which are there. I'm sorry about the internet being, I think you're putting this right. So there you are. So you have this timeline, and as you go along, you will see, if I click on these, each of these books sort of pop up. Now you can do this. This is not a problem. This tool is on Night Labs, and you can very easily engage in this kind of analysis. All right. this is something that you can try without learning too much. This is a tool that can be played with. You can ask your students. Students can themselves work on this and experiment. What is the fourth? And this is really the kind of area that I work on within the digital humanities. I told you it's a big tent. And everybody has their own specialized fields of expertise. Now, computation. Now, computation is the similar kind of techniques which are used by cybersecurity experts to either crack some kind of violation of cybersecurity, or map some misprint, or map something, or marketing and data analytics to work with big data to figure out how to pitch a particular product. These are the tools which are there. Now, what humanists and humanities researchers have done is now try to use them for their own kind of research. So what you have is a tool created by the Humanities Digital Lab at Stanford. It's called Palladio. It's an online tool which you can use. And if you upload a kind of a database which you can create of your work, you can visualize your data in different kinds of ways. So for example, what you see here is a kind of what is called a network graph, which shows you the links between various figures of history. Now, you can also put those links on a timeline as well as on a map. And what you get to see, this is basically trying to figure out Galileo's correspondence network. So there are various data points, which is the letter, when was it written, who wrote it, to whom. And if you put it on a timeline, you will see how Galileo, sort of with whom he starts relating to over his lifetime, and therefore what kind of ideas and all that. So it can be that if you are right, if you're reading an article on Galileo, there will be some small reference which would not be mentioned, because it's impossible in the narrative format to sort of project it. But in a big data visualization sort of mechanism, you get the whole data set, not a representative data set. So that is something that makes it phenomenally different, significantly different from the kind of research humanities scholars have engaged in hitherto. You can Palladio also has the facility to actually create a gallery view through which you make various kinds of resources available or easily searchable. All right. Now there's a little bit of my work. I mean, I try to use Palladio to map out the various kind of infections or the importing of the coronavirus into India from various parts of the world. There is another way to visualize this. This is called a Sankey graph, which shows from which continents and from which countries to which states in India the virus has traveled as per given record. Unfortunately, in India today on the coronavirus, there is very little publicly available data. But there is this crowdsourcing platform of COVID-19 tracker, which gives us the most authentic form of data. It's not fully authenticated, but it's most authentic. So data is very, very crucial in being able to make precision research. The other kind of examples are a network graph. Now, what you see on screen is during the Israel-Palestine, or the Israel's bombing of Palestine, one of many incidents. So this researcher sort of mapped the tweets related to this particular crisis, and they figured out that they tried to figure out the loyalties of various Twitter handles towards each of them, and you see that they're highly polarized. It shows a very highly polarized kind of atmosphere. So the distance from one particular hashtag to another hashtag is determined by how close they are or how distant they are from each other in terms of viewpoints, or in terms of followers, or who is sharing or who is retweeting whom. So that's what determines the, and this visualization gives us a sense of the level of polarization of of a particular Twitter hashtag or a particular theme on Twitter. All right, this is something that I have been working on. This I have done using a tool called Jeffy. What this does is I have taken Wikipedia pages on Indian history, and I have tried to figure out who are the editors. You know, Wikipedia is an open source platform. Anybody can go in and edit it. So what I try to map is the top editors, which are the pages in Indian history that they are editing. And you can see these little clouds which are there. So similar groups of editors are editing similar kinds of topics. And it gives us a bird's eye view. So this is almost about 250 pages, a bird's eye view of what is happening throughout Wikipedia in these 250 pages, which any form of, I can't be reading, let's say each of these pages, for example, the page Shivaji has some 6,000 versions, 6,000 times people have edited it. There's no way I can read it. But by learning, by using certain algorithms, produce a graph, and it can point out to me which are the ones that are important, which are, where is it that it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. Then I take the needle and then I go and research that topic further. All right. And this is another way. So these are common bigrams. Bigrams is two words, a two-word couple. That is like, for example, you have Lady Catherine, all right? So that will be two words. What is the relationship between two words or in Jane Austen's novel? So you can see a certain kind of stylistic preference or a certain thematic sort of amalgamation in entire oeuvre of Jane Austen at the touch of a button. All right, and here is again a list of the most used bigrams in Jane Austen's novels. This is also part of another technique called topic modeling, where here, for example, we see which are the commonly used terms. So you can see here at the center, the violet names are the ones which are the common terms between history and literature within a certain set of body of knowledge between history and literature. Where is the commonality? So if you want to work in certain interdisciplinary areas, how do you discover very easily what is terms of literature and history? You run the algorithm through, and you get a sense. All right. There are various other ways of working. Here is someone did a topic modeling of the various speeches and what are the various topics that are covered in European Parliament over a decade. What are the important topics that have been looked at? And also it is possible to put it on a timeline. Which are the topics? And nobody is sitting down and reading these speeches. There will be like hours and hours, hundreds and thousands of hours of speeches. It is just, these are speeches are transcribed, and the machine learning algorithm sort of runs through it and tells us what are the speeches. There's a very interesting sort of, I'm trying to move towards the end of the presentation. There's a very interesting kind of tool called Stylometry, which allows us to figure out what are the specific stylistic characteristics of particular writers or authors, or how has an author's style changed over time. And this is a particular kind of interesting project which takes styles of authors or styles of particular novels in Holland and link it to the rating of that particular novel in the market, and see what is the kind of style that does very well, and what is the kind of style people really don't want to read. It can also help you identify who has the authorship of particular articles. For example, someone revealed certain White House secrets in an anonymous article, and there's a lot of data analytics which went into trying to figuring out who is the author of this particular article. What are the emotions and then sentiment analysis? You can run it through. So, for example, what are the important sentiments that Donald Trump shows in his tweets? So, is it surprise, anticipation, anger, crazy? these are the various kinds of things. Also, it shows you which are the kind of go to this particular page. If you hover over each of these mouse clicks, you will see the tweet popping up. All right. So these are very interesting kind of tools which give you an overview of an entire range of work. And Sumita was talking about this particular map that she had worked on in the and this particular tool called Voyant, which was used to map out Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I want to show you another. That's a single text, but Voyant is a tool which has far greater number of resources, which allows you to look at a particular set of works and run a set of analysis to get a certain a picture at a remote view, as a bird's eye kind of view. Imagine getting a bird's eye view of an author like Shakespeare, his set of works. There's an amazing amount of possibility that could be hidden in there. Now, I'll wait for for Voyant to open up on my browser, but I'll move on. Now, Voyant is a readily available tool. It gives the naive user, the new user, a kind of an entry point. But if you really want to customize, many a times when you get deeper into it, you want to customize your argument or your analysis very specifically. One of the tools that you really need for that are programming languages called R and Python. Typically, humanities scholars do not get trained in programming, which is a shortcoming. We can overcome that shortcoming through collaboration, but we can also probably in future courses in digital humanities, we will be trying to learn. So now my Voyant screen has opened up, and what you see here is you can see a word cloud here of the important terms in Shakespeare. What are the important words? You can in dynamic, you can increase the number of words that you want to use in the analysis. It's also giving you the document length, which is the longest, which is the shortest kind of work in there. Then you get the correlations between various words. You get a certain document term here. How many times a certain through the length of the document, how much it has moved forward. You can and this gives this set of words allows you to this set of tools allows you to get a very broad overview of these texts. All right. Last few slides. If programming sounds very daunting, please you can start playing with it using this tool called Scratch, which is like a game. My 7-year-old daughter loves playing with this. You can make the cat. You can have other characters, make them dance, play music, play some songs, and bring other interact with other characters and other kinds of things. Run it in a loop. What this does, it's a lovely gamified atmosphere in which one can learn programming. But I think programming is the future for humanities courses. Literature students should, I would advocate, should have compulsory courses in coding, learning Python and R. I would like to point you to the Digital Humanities Alliance for Research and Teaching Innovations, DHARTI, which is the umbrella organization of digital humanists across India. There are people who are working on various various sectors of the big tent that I have tried to sort of rush through in this particular talk. And those of you who are interested, or your students are interested, beginning this summer, it is supposed to begin in July, but it might get delayed a bit. It is the Master of Science at IIT Jodhpur, and well, the deadline for applications is till 30th May. You can read more about it on their website. And thank you so much. I'll take questions now.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Arjun Ghosh, for this illuminating talk. I'm sure all the participants who are in this session must have immensely benefited from this talk. There have been many questions, but we may not be able to address all of them. Just to address a few of them, yes. Um, Mr. Kuntal Tamang from Department of English, Motilal Nehru College, Delhi University, has asked this question about the teaching pedagogy. The teaching that we are doing under the lockdown, if it is not digital pedagogy, then what is it? In what ways can we make it more digital pedagogy? We have no training to do this, but unfortunately the situation has pushed all of us to do this. Please help. So this is his concern and a question addressed to you.
Should I take? Should I
Yeah,
answer? I think I'll
yeah,
try to give
you can answer, and then we can move on to the next
quick
question.
answers so that we can accumulate as many of them as possible. So Kuntal, thank you for this question. Of course, it is digital pedagogy because we are using digital means. But what I meant to say was that this is not how digital pedagogy really would be. To explain this, I want to use a very important, interesting concept called digital contact zone. It's a take from Mary Louise Pratt's concept of contact zones, where two different civilizations, once they come together in the history of colonialism, they both sort of exchange ideas, and not necessarily that exchange is democratic. It's hierarchical, but there is something, both of them get changed and something new comes up. Now, what happens if you look at when print came in, initial printed fonts would try to emulate manuscript fonts. The print documents would look at the first Bible that was printed, would try to look as much as printed by Gutenberg, would try to look as much like a manuscript as possible. When we have PDF documents, now PDF is a way to transfer the shape and shape of a printed document onto the digital screen. Of course, the screen behaves very differently. The screen is infinite; it can grow. It need not have a finite space. So the Kindle, for example, it just keeps growing infinitely. You can increase the font or reduce the font. So slowly over time, the digital comes on its own. It creates sort of mechanisms of its own. What we see today is just like, instead of having students in the classroom, you have a camera in front of you. That's what I'm saying. That is very limited digital pedagogy. Digital pedagogy should use various kinds of mechanisms of interactive teaching, organizing online quizzes, allowing students to raise handles, bring in inputs, have various more kind of visual and visually interactive sort of sets of tools which need to develop, these tools need to be developed for the digital to really come about. Just putting a camera in front or sharing PDF with students, which many teachers, hundreds and thousands of teachers across India are required to do right now under duress, that is not the mark of digital technology, digital learning or digital pedagogy. We need investment in digital for digital pedagogy to work. And certainly I want to make a point that digital pedagogy is no substitute for classroom teaching. Both of them have their efficacies, both of them have their usefulness, but the two things need to be kept separate.
Okay, thank you, Arjun. Now moving on to the next question, which is from one of our final year students, Akhil Tulsidas. he has this question addressed to you. Do you think that digitization would do complete justice to the restoration of past, considering the fact that many historical texts are difficult to procure as they are largely based on heresy, and so on?
Well, I don't see it being able to. You're moving from one media to another, but certainly the advantage of the digital is that it allows for a certain kind of preservation, very limited kind of preservation, let me tell you, because one of the disadvantage of the digital is that formats keep changing. You move from one format to another in the space of 2 years, 3 years. So at one point of time, digitization meant making CDs out of things, out of manuscripts. Now you no longer, those CDs are can be played. Most of our computers don't have a CD-ROM drive. So these are strategy. I don't think one substitutes another, but the digital has a different set of possibilities. Certainly, when record that Akhil is talking about, which is oral, certainly they can be made recorded, they can be transcribed, but it will not be the full be a full restoration. Past can never be restored. Another strategy that has to be followed alongside it is to actually train people in these performance arts and forms, so that these forms survive. But the forms will not, even no matter how much we want, these forms will not survive as it is. Over years, over decades and centuries, performance practices undergo a certain change. So we cannot preserve, we cannot sort of fossilize anything, but certainly the digital has a different, digital archiving has a certain set of possibilities, and a culture as diverse as India should invest in its heritage, and it's welcome.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Neeru Chakrabarti, an associate professor from Satyavati College, has this question for you. What digital options are there for visually challenged students?
Well, my knowledge on this is very limited, but I must point you to certain research that is happening at my institute. Some of my colleagues are working on Braille laptops, where a visually challenged person can browse a website to touch, or the text will show up on Braille as certainly. And then certainly there are tools. Even current laptops and mobile phones, the very advanced ones, have them, where the text can be read out for visually challenged people. There needs to be greater investment, but there are certainly various kinds of tools which are coming into being. Researchers are working on them.
Dr. Kinshuk Majumdar from my department, a colleague of mine, has this question about the historical timeline, the problematics of pinning down or having a parallel in the historical timelining.
I'm not sure I have understood this too well, but if you're talking about parallel timelines, if you look at this tool like Palladio, it allows you to have multiple timelines. So, for example, if you have a timeline of political events alongside a timeline of an author's journey or an author's text, the two timelines can exist side by side, or you can choose which segment of the timeline to play out. There are multiple possibilities there. If I've understood the question correctly, then this is probably an answer to that question.
You can have one last question, because it's already pretty late. This is from Amrendra Kumar Thakur from Lalit Narayan Mithila University. His question is, does digital humanities have any bad impact on our society? Like, what would be the societal impact?
Sorry, Abbas, you have to repeat that question. I didn't hear it properly.
Does digital humanities have any bad impact on our society? Like, what would be the societal impact? at a time? That if you could see any.
This is a hypothetical question.
Yeah.
I think if people thought that digital humanities is just learning programming and or just digitizing and archiving and making video games, uh, and if that is the kind of restricted knowledge that gets distributed, then that would be wrong. I don't think there is any scope for leaving out the traditional domain knowledge of the humanities and social sciences. You need to understand your critical theory and positions and historical methods, and then use these methods with these additional tools to be able to carry out research. If any digital humanities scholarship sort of debunks uh, uh, the tremendous amount of progress that humanities scholarship has, humanities and social science scholarship has gained through what one calls close reading methods. So the distinction is between mechanisms of close reading and distance reading, between the reader sitting in the cloister and the bird's eye view of the text. If there is a dichotomy sought to be worked out between these two, then that will be a disaster. If that could be a negative effect, then that is it. But of course, the various programs are very well aware of it and will not hopefully make that mistake in designing pedagogical tools and curricula.
My colleague and IQAC convener, Dr. Kusha Tiwari, has this question to you. Is digital humanities a space or medium creating more hypertexts, especially such hypertext that moves the participant further away from the text? So how could one deal with that possibility?
Well, it all depends on the design of that hypertext. You see, the problem is that with the hypertext design, if you play Bandersnatch, for example, I suggest those of you who have Netflix connection, an account, can go and play Bandersnatch, or even play that COVID migrant game that I put forward. It You will see that there is a certain plan. There are multiple strands possible, but if you keep replaying it, the number of strands you will have exhausted the number of strands. There is no way within these games where it takes you outside this loop, this larger sitemap. The sitemap, at the end of it, it has branches. It doesn't have a single linear form of narrative. It has branches, but it still keeps you within the tree. So that way, I think mostly, in hypertext storytelling, the reader does not jump out of the text, right? I mean, for example, sometimes when you go onto a particular site and you click on it, it gives you a little warning. This is trying to take you from outside this particular site. Are you willing to do that? And but however, in most hypertext storytelling, it stays within the tree.
One more question. This is from Shivangi Chaturvedi, Research Scholar, Department of English, BHU. She says that thank you, sir, for such an informative talk. The question that she has for you is that the growth in DH, digital humanities, and its application in the field of literature, are we moving towards a new phase in new criticism? I mean, is there a strong connect that you could see? Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I said, that the digital tools do not are not themselves either new critical or bring in other forms of reading techniques. Whatever the research questions that we want to ask from a certain body of work, it allows us to bring those in. Certainly, the tools that I have demonstrated here is that, okay, when we are looking at a certain text, we are looking at within the text. But similar kind of tools are available for us to look at the context as well, right? So you can run it through the archives or run it through other kinds of, so somebody has written a certain novel and you want to check out what is the kind of buzz that is there on Instagram or on Facebook, uh, and you use digital tools. Imagine a situation where you are studying certain films and you want to check their reactions. And there would be, if you go to the IMDb page for a particular, or Reddit or something, or even Twitter or Facebook, there will be hundreds and thousands of reactions that people would have given to a particular app. Now it will be virtually impossible to go and look through them at any one point of time. You will need these digital tools to be able to do that. So it's not only for purpose of demonstration have I demonstrated some of the tools which are applied only to the text. But similar sort of tools are used for other material as well. And the scholar and these tools should be at the scholar's disposal to be able to read a text or a set of texts or a body of text in the way they want to.
Okay, Arjun, I have a question for you. I was just wondering about the Tower of Babel. I mean, I would have liked you to refer to that, because when you were talking of iconography, when you were talking of the past, emancipating out of whatever we had, into a present which is more digitized and so on and so forth. Cultural iconography and certain institutional linguistic and spatial signature constructs, they have always played a remarkable role in rephrasing how we see our past and how we remodule the kind of intent that we have towards converting, humanities. So I would have liked a kind of a reference to, for example, the Tower of Babel, as the linguistic source, for example, So just your comment on that. Yeah.
Well, Abbas, you're right. Language does play a very important role. In fact, some of the tools that I was talking about bases themselves on natural language processing. And many of the digital humanities tools which are related to textual analysis have their basis, have their fundamentals from within natural language processing, which is why which is why the Python programming language becomes a very important set of tools. So there are two basic paradigms. One is R, which is very good for data analytics and manipulating data, whereas Python is very good, much more pronounced in the form of natural language processing. So all the stylometrics and the sentiment analysis, these kind of tools allow you to study language in a very very granular sort of way, and check out certain trends in language usage, which can tell us a lot more about a certain the quality of a certain body of work, or a series of work, or work across time, which traditional humanities close reading may not be able to.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, some of the other questions are coming in, so if you could please address one or two, maybe. If we are exceeding limit, then Sumita, please stop and let's see. This is from Amit, who is an English department faculty at Vivekananda College. He has this question for you. The distance for humanities across the world is developing among nations with low investment. Do you think Indian government, the state, would be willing to invest in digital humanities in the kind of structures that we are looking for? What scope it has in the political imagination?
Unfortunately, I would like the government to invest in this and help universities to start such courses. And really, universities should do it themselves, because you see what is happening mostly, because these tools are at the disposal of those who are aware of certain inroads into technology. There are two things that are happening. One is that it is allowing a certain feeling to non-domain researchers to delve into traditional humanities scholarship areas in traditional humanities scholarship. So data scientists or computer researchers, they would run their tools through some texts and get certain results and show them out as certain findings. But they don't engage with the kind of humanities scholarship that someone who has spent years, if not decades, researching the humanities, that domain interaction does not take. So it is important to actually empower humanities scholars with these tools, so that we get these tools to ask the kind of questions which are relevant to us and to sharpen the research questions on the basis of our domain knowledge. The second thing that is happening is, because digital humanities as a form, as a particular area, has developed primarily in Europe and in America, and now it is developing in Japan and in Latin America primarily. So the tools allow you to ask certain questions only of the text written in these languages, and the biases and other things which are there within these tools are also ingrained in these. The algorithm is not above politics. All right, we can look into what is the politics of the algorithm. The algorithm also makes certain choices, and we should be critical of them. So it is very important to design tools. For example, if I wanted to run something in Marathi or Bangla, there will be very limited resources which are possible. It is important that we invest as a community, as a nation, in these tools, so that our stories, once again, after 70 years of independence, is not told by the Westerners.
Okay, one of our students again, Amartya Sen from English department. He has a question. Digital pedagogy, though, may be an inferior alternative to classroom teaching learning, but I would like to look at the importance of this medium of interaction in terms of storing, fossilizing, archiving information in a nitty-gritty discussion fashion, which we may not be able to do record or incorporate in classroom. What is your take on it?
You know,
Um,
I would
Amartya.
not. I would not share Amartya's framing of the question, which is that there's a dichotomy between the two. That the two are one is superior and the other is inferior. Each of them have their own advantages and disadvantages, and if they have a role to play. So one of the things that is happening with online tools is that faculty have been asked to share all the material that they have shared with the students in the last month or 2 months, put them in a repository for future use. So if I teach an online course, so to say, in front of a camera, that's get frozen and they can run it again and again. It becomes a kind of a cost-effective mechanism where you teach once and you can rerun that course thousands of times without changing. Right? These are the kind of technologies that are being invested in. It is important that we develop digital pedagogies that allow us to modulate our discussion according to student response as well, according to times. If I'm teaching a course this year, then next year I'll teach it slightly differently according to the makeup of the. So I've given this lecture. Now I imagine if this video goes on YouTube. Now the set of questions, the kind of responses that it has generated, I know who the participants are, and I spoke according to that. If it was a very different audience, if it was an audience of more undergraduate student rather than faculty, I would have spoken very different. There needs to be scope for this, and there has to be room for both. So just because there are audio cassettes or CDs or MP3 players, we have not stopped going to the concert to listen to the artist, right? So the oral and the performative continues to be relevant even in the era of the print and the digital. And so therefore classroom teaching should continue to be relevant even alongside digital pedagogy. Digital pedagogy gives us a certain kind of reach, which classroom teaching may not be able to give, but classroom teaching allows us a certain kind of engagement, which digital pedagogy may not be able to reach. Now, there's no either or. Each of them have their own advantages and disadvantages, and there should be space for two. This is no cost-cutting mechanism that you pay one teacher to run a course and then 6,000, 7,000 people register for it. So I don't have to pay salaries to 15 or 20 or 50 teachers. I think that kind of a strategy will be suicide.
Arjun, there is a question from Sharina Joshi from Deshbandhu College. Arjun, the work on mapping is very interesting. Taking the example of Israel and Gaza, what are the dangers of digitizing and mapping for individual liberty? Can it not increase manipulation? Yeah, please.
Hi, Sharina. Great to hear from you. And yeah, a very pertinent question. Yes, I think it is important that any digital research mechanism should be aware of the privacy restrictions. Most of the time, the data that is used in these kind of research is anonymized, so as to show a larger picture, but not pinpoint people. Of course, the technology that we are using for these particular kind of digital tools are, as I said, have been developed through these kind of security apparatuses, which are designed specifically to fix blame. But mostly any data scientist or digital humanities scholar should ensure that most of the data and the results that are put forward are anonymized. And therefore, there should be, I would recommend that any digital humanities program should include in its curricula the legal aspects, particularly related to privacy and intellectual property rights.
Before I ask our principal sir to address briefly, Asha sir has a question, I guess. Excellent. Yeah, please, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Abbas. Thank you,
Sorry.
Professor Ghosh. Actually, I don't have asked a question, so I was just very intently going through your presentations, and thank you for making very learned kind of a presentation before the audience. I hope my point was that I just reminding of I went down the lane during my student days. I was just thinking about how bad the times were when being students of literature specifically in the classroom you are teaching about Greek literature, you are talking about medieval literature and British literature. Even we don't officially world map came in 16th century AD, I think. So we don't have an idea of the how does the world look. Being teachers of English, it would have been very difficult for handling a student like me. So unless you correlate, unless you present a map, world map before me, even the Greek mythology, even the kind of god, goddesses, all kinds of things. How would the text would have been? I am not a student of literature, but I could visualize. If there happened to be students like lot of students like me, it could be in a very different frontier. And unless I visualize, unless I could connect to the context, it is very difficult for me to grasp. And same with most of the students, it will become very useful or easy to grasp when students will be they'll be connecting with the context they are being taught. So in that context, this digitalization is I know it's revolutionizing the whole scenario. Even in management also, people are making a lot of experimentations, like they are bringing simple artwork to these classrooms to make them more creative, to make the students achieving group tasks and other things. So this way it is an eye opener, and I hope all the audience, or mostly the teachers and other things, we could use it, because these are all even lot of things we could innovate ourselves to to build a bigger visualization of the classroom, to connect with the context. I hope I'm going with the same line which Professor Arjun Ghosh has presented. So that's why I wanted to congratulate you, and the innovations you can keep on sharing so that the teachers will be benefited. You know, a lot of things they don't have time. All the time they are busy with assignments, lot of things, and undergraduate teaching as such. All the time they are busy with a lot of students also. So researchers like you can help them, organizing workshops in a periodic interval. So these are the new things have come up. So they can, most of the people are very now ready to receive, and there is no, substitute for classroom teaching. So these are only supplemented, and it will be very, very easy for the student to connect. So that is my point. Thank you.
So, thank you, Dr. Narayan. I agree with you. And, throughout my presentation, I have tried to have these particular slides where I try to share certain tools where students or faculty can try out certain tools for themselves. And I'd be very happy whenever I think this crisis is over, or even online, to organize workshops for students and faculty to take you through some of these tools, and even initiate to programming. We can organize workshops and get things started. In fact, one way in which digital humanities started out worldwide is through these summer and winter schools, in which people would gather together and learn a few techniques, and then use them in their research. So that's probably a way forward, and I would be happy to work with you.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your constant support, and this has been really possible with your constant encouragement. Over to Sumita now. Yeah, Sumita, please.
Thank you so very much, Arjun. This has been a tremendously illuminating talk. And I mean, this was such a thorough presentation. I can't imagine how much effort must have gone into it. So I'm sure we have all here learned a lot today. Thank you again so much for accepting our invitation at such short notice, and truly giving us a wonderful hour and a half till now. I would also like to thank our principal, sir, who has always played a very enabling role when it comes to the intellectual and extra academic life of our college. He has never stopped us from doing anything. So this has also, only become possible because from the beginning I have been, communicating with him at every stage and have had his full permission to do this as we wanted, as our department wanted it. I would also like to thank Dr. Kusha Tiwari, our IQAC convener. She is the one who's there for every single webinar. She's also, involved in all of these webinars all the time. So I'm sure it also must be kind of tiring for her to do this every single day. We have had webinars and things going on the entire last week. We had one yesterday. We have another one tomorrow. So it's an ongoing thing for her. I'd also like to thank here all the members of our department. Abbas, of course, for handling the Q&A so wonderfully, filtering through all those questions along with Anuj, which also must not have been an easy task. But all the rest of our department also who have been in the background taking care of all the nitty-gritties of this seminar. I would also want to thank our non-teaching staff. First, of course, Suman Jha, Mr. Suman Jha, who has, been our backbone here today, right there at the controls with us, making sure nothing goes wrong. I'd also like to thank all the other non-teaching staff who have, even now, right now, are taking care of our college premises. So we know what a college is right now. It will be in perfect shape when we reach back home and we reach back, to college after this crisis is over. And even now, as this new session begins, they are making preparations for the, how the new semester would be managed along, with the guidance of our principal. I now want to thank all the members of the, webinar who have registered in such huge numbers. I really want to apologize to all those who could not be a part of it, because we only had a limit of 100 participants, and we did give, approvals to many more than that. So all those who could not be a part of it, let me tell them that there will be a recording, which of course they'll only know this when they see this, that recording uploaded, but there will be a recording which we will upload on our website very soon. Earlier in the guidelines, we said that, e-certificates have to be sent, so people would have to fill up a Google form, but that was before we really knew the capabilities of this platform. You don't need to fill a Google form. The Zoom will itself generate a report for us, so we have all your attendance with us already, and we will use that for your e-certificates. Now, with this, again, thanking everybody again, I would like to announce this particular webinar over. So I hope you all had a good time. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Arjun, again.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.